Mayor Matheson, we have to talk about the Stratford Festival. It's if Reggie Jackson were here, he would say it's the straw that stirs the drink, isn't it? Would you agree?
Oh, definitely. 140 million of GDP a year, 3,000 jobs directly and indirectly. The stat from the Conference Board of Canada is for every one job in the theatre, 4 in the community rely on the theatre.
So, okay, what's going on there right now?
Well, I have had many conversations with Anthony Cimolino and Anita Gaffney.
You're talking about the artistic director and the executive director.
What those two are looking at is how do they continue to build the Stratford brand through this whole piece. So they have taken the Shakespearean plays that they filmed in HD a number of years ago, and they're having a film festival, and they're putting them online. They will look when they get an understanding of the rules with regard to how they can provide programming, whether there's things they can do throughout the year to keep the brand going. Realizing that the Stratford Festival starts planning next season now, start making props and costumes in the fall of the year and through the winter. So by the time this was canceled, they had expended a large amount of money on what was to be a banner 2020.
Well, isn't that what Mr. Cimolino talked about when he made the plea for $40 million because there are bills to pay now to help the festival stay afloat? Are they raising that $40 million?
So what the theatre has done is they've had very generous people say, I don't want a ticket refund. Keep it for next season. They've had some people say, you can keep my ticket money as a donation for this year. They've had some people ask for a refund of their ticket money. I have been involved in conversations with Minister Stephen Guilbeault, who is the Canadian Heritage Minister. I have had conversations with his parliamentary secretary. I have spoke to regional staff from Minister of Finance office, and we have made the case that doing something with the Stratford Festival and helping ensure that they're around is important, because it's just not keeping a festival afloat, it is a foundational part of an economy. And we've given them lots of stats around that. We're helping them to understand that we're not the lighthouse, the TIFF lighthouse box at the Bells in Toronto. We're not the Toronto Film Festival. We are a 7-month economic engine with 982 productions scheduled for this year that really requires some support on a longer-term strategy.
Do you think that that federal minister, before you started your discussion with down that road, had any sense of what the festival means to this city of 32,000 people?
Oh, I think he does, but
has he been here?
No, not since he's been in place. He was made the minister in October after the last election.
Isn't this a no-brainer to come to the rescue of this Stratford Festival?
It is, but I'll go back to my education. I understand the need they have to create policy decisions which are equal in Charlottetown, at the Confederation Centre, at the Citadel, and in Halifax.
Are you talking about something as small as the Arts Club Theatre on Granville Island, or are you talking about big institutions?
Bigger institutions, like the Charlottetown Theatre, the Confederation Theatre in Charlottetown has the same type of impact on the community of Charlottetown. So whatever they do here, they need to be able to look the 4 MPs in the eye that represent the island and say that's what it is. If they're going to talk to the Theatre de la Mode in Montreal and say this is what we did in Stratford and this is what we're willing to do for you.
Careful with your prima donna attitude, in other words.
Yeah, you're important. What understanding there is there is a challenge across the country, and I understand that. Now, they can also have programs that reflect the level of economic activity that you provide. So So for us, they could say, Stratford, here's your base funding. Everybody gets this base funding. Stratford, you're a step up because of tickets sold, earned revenue, size of operation, all those things. And they could then have a policy for the next threshold.
Do you ever worry that this could come down to something as menial as, well, the federal member of parliament is of this stripe and the provincial member of provincial parliament is of this stripe? Does it get that way in a time of crisis?
No, I would say not at all. John Nader has been a very, very strong advocate for us.
He's the federal member of
He's
parliament.
Federal member.
He's with the Conservative Party.
He's
Yes.
a Conservative member, and Randy Pettiby's a Conservative member of the provincial legislature.
Progressive Conservative.
Absolutely. John has been very good. And, the minister answered my letter sent electronically and a call to his office. Within 48 hours, I was able to secure a meeting with him through Zoom. Great, really appreciate it. Had access to his parliamentary secretary as a follow-up. Had a referral to the finance department. Every one of them acknowledges John Nader's prodding letter of support, other people's letters of support. So there was never I got the letter from the other guy. It was, no, I've heard the message. It's been very well received.
Okay. What's the next very concrete, specific piece of news that we are going to hear about the Stratford Theatre Festival, do you think? And will it be positive, negative, or indifferent?
I don't know when it will be. I'm going to tell you what you're going to see. Probably by mid-June, you're going to see the Tom Patterson Theatre complete. You will see the landscaping done to a certain level and the fencing down.
And for our listeners and viewers, the Tom Patterson is the state-of-the-art facility right down on the $75 million.
$70 million theater.
Replacing an old space that used to be part of the old Badminton Club. So that will be completed. It looks like it's almost completed down by the river.
It was they would say 98% complete. So now you're going to see them over the next 3 to 4 weeks complete that. The landscape architects and the contractors will move in and start to put in place the mulch and everything. You're not going to see them maybe do all the landscaping because it is an expensive undertaking.
Fair enough,
but they're going to make it look.
Yeah, but what does that do aside from cheer up the city? And that will aesthetically, it will be beautiful, and it will give us a boost, I think. But what news do you think we're going to hear soon that will either give us a boost about the future of our festival or make us stop and think, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think we saw it with the theatre through the Canadian Wage Subsidy brought back a number of workers. In the next 3 weeks, they're going to have to make a decision whether to carry that through to the end of August. I think if we get some level of consistency in our day-to-day lives and we get to a steady state, you'll see the theatre continue to try to do outreach digitally through different pieces to keep connected with this community and beyond.
Will that be a revenue source for them?
I don't know whether it'll be a revenue source as much as it is a brand marker. They don't want to let the brand slip. They want to stay top of mind, and they want to keep engaging their patrons, whether it's here in Ontario or across North America and around the world. They're going to continue to try to keep top of mind with them.
Okay, bums and seats, distance apart. All of those public health concerns that are connected with this crisis. How in hell is this theatre festival going to be able to get back up on its feet anytime soon?
Well, it really comes down to public health guidelines. So there's nobody watching them closer than Anita and Anthony. And every time they think they're getting closer to larger ones, they go, okay, how could we operationalize if they told us we could only have 50% houses?
Do you think they have some solutions?
I do. They have they're no different than the city with their initiatives team. They're looking at initiatives to say, okay, if we had a 40 or 50% house marker, how could we start to divide the house up? What does the revenue model look like? And then how do we step out of it over 2 years or 3 years?
Over 2 years or 3 years, do you think, how long will it take for the festival to recover? Do we need to wait for a vaccine, even though we're not really sure about the vaccine's efficacy if it comes?
Well, and I wouldn't even want to hazard a guess. We haven't got that far into it. I think a vaccine is an easy marker for people to look at, but I think really it's going to come down to people's level of comfort within environments. I remember SARS, we talked about whether it was a 2 or a 3 or 4, how long, and it just seemed to go away. With this, it doesn't seem that's possible, but I think we just need to continue to be
Okay, all right, so let's rein it in here a little bit. Where do you think we'll be with our festival in a year's time?
I would say in a year's time, if we have handled this pandemic well, and we've got through the 3 waves, and we've gotten to a vaccine. We will open the Stratford Festival season on May 24th, 2021, to a sellout.
A month ago, I think it was about a month ago, that we communicated by text. It was the day that the Stratford Festival announced that it was, I think their word was they were going on pause. But we know better. We're not going to see the festival this year. And I'm paraphrasing what you told me that night, that our city faces unprecedented numbers of personal and commercial bankruptcies and a spike in unemployment. You've already talked about the unemployment number. Do you stand by that statement today about bankruptcies?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you why. I if I remember our conversation correctly, I talked about it being SARS, 2008 downturn, and 9/11 all at once. And I'll tell you why. If you were to poll people about the 4 things that matter most to them in economic turmoil, they'd talk about freedoms, security of their family, their health, and their economic well-being. What we have happen is the 9/11 security issue. We've got that now. You don't know where you can go, you don't know what you can do, who you can be with, all those things. You have the medical challenge of SARS, but on a scale amped up. Nobody wants to be intubated and want to be talking about ventilators, and it has dramatic impact on some and maybe not others. So you don't even know how you can avoid COVID light versus COVID heavy. So for people, that's like, oh, what am I going to do? 3, you have the economic downturn of 2008, where everything just crashed quickly, and you're not sure where it's going to go. So we've had all of that, plus the concern about their family. Are my kids going to be okay? What are my kids' futures going to be like? The government of Canada is going to be $252 billion deficit. How many years do they pay for it? Do those kids pay for it? All those challenges have come together. I still believe that when we're not welcoming 1.5 million visitors a year to Stratford this summer, that we are going to have large-scale commercial bankruptcies for businesses that really need that 7 months of strong economic activity to survive 12 months.
We're not going to pan the plaza here and look at any businesses, but I'm looking around, and so are you. And we are in the I always called it, since we moved here a few years ago, the inner sanctum of the city. I always think of Stratford as having more than one downtown. Out on the main drag, Ontario Street, inside here around City Hall. Lovely, both areas. You know, we could talk about the mall area out in the east end, the big stores in the west end, all of the industrial and commercial and retail in the south end of the city. A little less so up in the north end. So when you think about our city and all of these businesses and these going concerns, these enterprises, if you just looked around this market square, in a year's time, what's it going to look like?
Well, I have some serious concern that we could lose 20% of our business.
20%.
Earlier I'd maybe thought 30, but I sit and think about how some businesses have responded so well.
Well, so you've gone from thinking, 30% now to 20%. That's significant. How did you get there?
Well, because I just saw some people rise to the challenge where you thought, okay, they just haven't said, we don't have a theater season, what am I going to do?
To list is to exclude.
Yep.
I'm really tempted to ask you, who do you think, who are the adapters and the great responders here among the businesses? Or is that too dangerous because you don't want to leave anybody out?
I'm going to give you a couple of examples because I don't want to name businesses.
Yeah.
But I know one business that said through the month of November through January, I did 680 online transactions.
Would you describe this as a small business, medium-sized business?
I would say it's a medium-sized business, downtown Stratford, in the retail sector.
I think I might know who you're talking about.
And they said, because I went and adapted, brought in social media, really changed my online offerings, streamlined how I'm going to do it, and drove it. I've had 1,600.
Okay,
And
that's
I
great.
And I say, okay, for somebody I was worried about, you've understand the pivot.
You've taken them off your list of concerns,
Yeah.
but you're also hearing from small to medium-sized, hell, even large businesses, you're accessible. People get in touch with you at home or at your office. Are you hearing the desperate pleas or the desperation from small businesses? And do you know already that a business that I might be staring at here in downtown Stratford that, you know, looks like it's going to open again is probably never going to open? Do you know those stories?
Yep, I know a couple of them. I've had entrepreneurs call and cry on the phone because the CERB doesn't work for them. The Canadian Emergency Workers Supplement doesn't work for them. The money that was announced last week through the Regional Economic Development Group, FedDev, Federal Development Agency of Southwestern Ontario, doesn't work for them. And they just say I got nothing, and I have no more line to put anything else on my house, and I'm not going to go deeper in my savings, and now I'm just trying to figure out how to gracefully exit.
You like to solve problems. It's from what I've observed of you over the time that we've lived here. What can you offer that person?
Well, some cases I've reached out and said, look, let's get you down to the small business center. Let's get you in front of a business consultant who can look at your cash flow analysis. Let's figure out where your margins were on certain things. Is there something somebody can do? And those services are available for people to do.
How many businesses are there in Stratford? Do you have a handle on that?
Yeah,
Small and medium size?
I would say if you were to say there was 1,100 businesses.
So
in
you're
Stratford.
thinking 20% of 1,100.
Yep.
That's well more than 200 businesses that could be gone.
Or impacted in some degree. So for example, some of them will be very obvious where they'll say, you know, they had a 3,000, 4,000 foot store downtown. They don't need that anymore. They can't afford the rent. So do they need to be in the downtown core? And two, do they need as big a foot space as they had, or square footage space? And if they're not downtown, what do we do with that storefront? Because if you look around here, Stratford's got a heritage downtown core. It is one of the biggest selling features, along with this building, the parks, the theater, the cuisine, the retail. All those things are what sells Stratford. If all of a sudden we have boarded up stores all the way along, we start to mirror other communities across southwestern Ontario, which I'm not going to name, but we used to say, well, I'm glad we're not them. Mm-hmm. Well, we might actually start to mirror some of those.
How many restaurants do you think we're going to lose? People talk about the restaurants in Stratford.
You know, I think there's probably 10 or 12 in the downtown core that are going to be challenged to come back. Because if we keep the seating guideline of 25% maximum capacity or 50%, you look at them already and you say, look, they had to turn over tables on a Tuesday through Saturday night 3 times during the theater season to make this place go. And now all of a sudden they don't have that same capacity and they're turning over a smaller amount. And one of the challenges will be, can we provide enough detailed information to help people make the right informed decision? The last thing I want us to do is prop somebody up to get them through the summer so that we can have a letdown in November, December, January, and have them say, well, I should have never done whatever I did to get here. I want people to make the decision, which is, where are you going to be in 3 years? Are you going to be able to get through this? And the Tom Patterson can open, and we get back to what was supposed to be a banner season.
Why do they come to you? Aside from the fact that you're the mayor, what do you know?
Well, it's not that. They'll say, maybe you know somebody that can help me, or can you do me a favor and introduce me to somebody else? Or, I don't know who else to turn to. If I tell you my problem, is there a solution? There's another restaurant in town, don't want to name them, because they have a problem with the TSSA on a piece of equipment they had installed.
Tell me TSSA.
Technical Safety Standards Association. And they've come now in the middle of a pandemic and done an inspection and said, oh, we've got a couple things we need you to change. And by the way, we'd like you to do it in 45 days. And the business owner's going, I'm barely able to keep this place going, and now you want me to do X or Y. So I got a call and said, how do I deal with this? So you get on the phone, You try to find somebody from TSSA. You say, I get it's a safety thing, but do you triage it? Is it immediate? Is it, is there remedial work that you can give somebody? Because asking them to do X could mean the difference between I'm open and I'm not. And that comes from years of being in the office.
What is the unemployment rate in our city?
As of the end of April, the unemployment rate in this city was sitting at 8%. Now, I believe that statistic is not right.
What do you think it is?
I think it's probably closer to 12 or 13%.
And the national is somewhere on the order of about 18% if you count the people who can't look or aren't.
Absolutely, and I think
Are you going to get there? Are we going to get there?
Oh, we're going to probably be below that, and I'll tell you why we're going to be. Traditionally, we have been able to stay below the national average and the Ontario average because of a strong manufacturing sector here. Now, even if manufacturing doesn't come all the way back, our manufacturing sector here at 80% is much better than some of the other ones at 90 to 100. So I think we'll be able to balance it out, but we're still going to end up probably in the area of 12 to 15%, I think, on a reasonable assessment. I also worry, though, that this is not a 4-month and we're done. This is a 24 to 36 month cycle we're going to be in. And we are now starting to think about our budgeting here at the City of Stratford in that same cycle. That the shortfall we're going to see within the budget this year is not going to automatically rebound in 2021 and 2022.
And we're going to get into following that money. Just go back to the unemployment figure again. So what was it in January?
So I'll give you a better one. At the end of November, it was 2.9%. And so we have seen a steep rise. If you think of this downtown core between retail, tourism, hospitality, there is conceivably 20 to 30% of these businesses that will have challenges going forward. And we are trying to find different ways to support them. Last week, through provincial money, we gave out 30 $1,500 support packages across Perth County. 22 of them came here to Stratford to help businesses get online, improve their web presence, help them actually do online ordering so that they could create an opportunity to continue to be in the economy. Weeks ago, I was quite scared. Mental health challenges were at a very high level. We were getting calls either from agencies that the city supports or agencies that report into the city for some form of funding, and there was concern around that. I think as the weather has changed a little bit and we've seen a steady state where people have an idea of what it's going to mean for them going forward, I think it's allowed people to maybe have a better outlook on things than they maybe did before. So I think that's helped. I think in the coming weeks, if we can get through phase 1 and effectively continue to manage the outbreak, and we can get to phase 2, as long as people take a measured approach, 2 meters, 6 feet, they understand wearing a mask if they need to in a lot of public settings, then I think we can get on to phase 2, and I think that will start to help people feel better about what's going on.
Let's home in on people who live in this city, our neighbors, our friends, strangers. Let's look at different groups of people here and how well their concerns are being met, voices heard, and how well they're asserting their voices. So I think about, gosh, all kinds of different groups, visible minorities, people who live with intellectual, physical, mental health challenges, Indigenous peoples, the LGBTQ community, New Canadians, many, many people who are part of your constituency. How much are you hearing from these different communities of people?
So I'm hearing quite a bit, but also agencies are hearing a lot. So social services is working with a lot of those partners, whether it be through the United Way or other groups who are coming forward to them and saying, here's an issue our group has. This is how they're feeling challenged, threatened, stressed at this time. How can you help us? And we've tried to redeploy. I was happy to see that out of the federal government's $350 million community fund announced a couple weeks ago, $400,000 of that fund will find its way to the United Way here. Our share between Perth and Huron County and Stratford share, we should end up with a very large chunk of that.
How does that help? That amount of money it sounds big.
Well, that's not including the $200,000 that will go to the community foundation here to support $200,000 to support Perth County.
Fair enough. Before I get to the next question, I was thinking today as I was driving down Ontario Street, I forgot to look at I always call it the thermometer, but it's what is it called again? It's out by the restaurant.
Well, we call it a thermometer, but the United Way goalpost.
Okay, the goalpost. Now it looks like it's peeking into red. It's quite. Is that campaign ongoing? How much has been raised? Doesn't that usually wind down by this time of year at United Ways across the country?
Yes. So what you've saw with that is the annual goal to operate the 48 organizations across Huron and Perth County. We have become almost, I think, hit the goal per se. I'd have to look it up. But there was a separate fund of over $250,000 that was raised in this community across Perth County just for COVID-related activities. That $400,000 will actually help underlie that. That's not including the $200,000 the Community Foundation has. So now we're going to be able to start saying to marginalized groups threatened, if there's certain programming needs you have, if there's certain supports you're going to need, we now have funding in our community to do it. A good example was we were given funding for mental health through that fund for the United Way. We were concerned though that business owners and others that were feeling very stressed about their future, we raised another $10,000 separate for that to get counseling hours for entrepreneurs, business people, not to do a new business plan, but to mentally be able to deal with the anxiety and stress so that they could actually then go deal with their business plans.
How are we going to pay the bills? By the way, did we pay our property taxes in April? I know that people in Hamilton, Ontario, 80% of people paid their property taxes.
We're right on the numbers. So our due date of April 9th should have seen the city receive $15 million of property tax. Deferrals, individuals that set aside their payments, actually was only $3 million. So we received $12 million of our property tax. And that to me was a very heartening sign.
Yeah, what does it say?
It says to me that some people, while they're probably hurting, still saw their need to pay their obligation to the city, and they did so in an effort to keep us salted. And as we head towards August, we will look at what that means again as we head towards the August due date, where we should look for another $15 million of revenue to come into the city.
What does that mean for the budget of the city?
So what we do is we've started to look at a couple things. First of all, our money we have in reserves for future projects. We're going to replace a trunk sewer, and so we've set money aside. So trunk sewers, we have $6 million in reserve. We have so many millions aside for future water projects. But what we do is we use that money and we pay ourselves an interest back on it. So what we'll try to do is use as much as our reserve funds and pay the lower interest rates of 2% or less on those monies, similar to what we'd get if we were in a long-term GIC at Royal Bank or the Ontario Financing Authority, and we'll try to do that. And where we can, we will use our own funds. We also have a line of credit, which we are trying to make sure that we don't go on to and use for exceptional
loans and interest rates. Interest rates are favorable still,
yes.
Right? That helps cities like Stratford.
Yeah.
We have what kind of a credit rating?
So we're small enough that we actually don't get a credit rating. So I'll give you an idea. The 70 million, we'll call it 70 because I didn't check the debt numbers on it. But if we had $70 million outstanding, the total amount of city assets is a little over $900 million. So we owe roughly 8% on our assets. So we're in good shape.
What would you sell off? if you had to?
I'm not a big proponent to sell off. And some people would quickly say, what about selling off the hydro utility? But I think that's been one of our strategic growth opportunities. Because we control the hydro assets, we've been able to add a second transformer, which allows us to go after industry.
Is it a cash cow for us?
Well, I'll give you an example. We built it in 2014, and it's paid for in 2021. It was a 7-year, $15 million note we paid back.
So you won't sell off the utility, but if push came to shove, what would the city have to look at?
Well, you could look at whether or not you would divest of a portion of it, but you'd never want to give up control. And the only way you would do it is a strategic alliance that allowed us to grow the revenue base, the customer base, or something.
Would that be with Hydro One or some other utility?
Hydro One's continuing to look for opportunities. My challenge with them is there's a reason the province kind of shunned them as being the default provider of electricity in the province, or electrical distribution in the province of Ontario, and I don't think we need to go back to doing that.
Okay. Boy, that sounds like another discussion. I hear talk about, and I don't keep up to speed, that we're going to get a new Y, that University of Waterloo Stratford may expand, that there might be a student center, perhaps the library is moving in that place. It's called the Community Hub.
So the Grand Trunk...
Is anything happening?
So the Grand Trunk Community Hub really is the second phase of the Tom Patterson. When we had sold the facility to the Stratford Festival to build the new Tom Patterson, the plan was to amalgamate in the Grand Trunk Community Hub, the old CNR site, a new YMCA, the Student Life Center of the university, and seniors and the youth center all in one facility.
Seniors, what do you mean by that?
Stratford Active Adults.
Am I hearing past tense there? Is this going to happen?
Well, it is. I believe so. We have applied to the Ontario Infrastructure Program that was announced a year ago now, which is a program between the federal government, the provincial government, and local governments. And there is a stream for community initiatives. There is a 40% of the project is paid for by the federal government. 33% of any project that's qualified and approved is from the provincial government, 27% from the local government. That deadline for applications was last fall. In April of this year, they were supposed to make announcements around who was getting funding. Because of COVID, it's been pushed back to the middle of June. Okay. And what will happen is the province will recommend to the federal government a series of projects which they will say, we are ready to go forward with. We believe that we are in good shape to be on that list.
Do you have any intel on that?
We are working all the time with federal and provincial ministers.
Scale of 1 to 10. Where do you rate your confidence that we'll get the money to build the Grand Trunk Hub?
I'm an 8. I'm very optimistic that we will get there. And so what we've been doing is we've been working with them. If we make that provincial recommended list to the federal minister, Catherine McKenna, who was here back in February for a large bus announcement.
Saw her at Revel Cafe.
Yep, that's right. I saw you there that day. Had her at the University of Waterloo last fall for a briefing. I have briefed the minister personally 3 times on it. I have every confidence that she understands the importance for the community, and I believe they will give us some funding for that project, which would then trigger the provincial funding, which would then trigger ours. And then I believe they're looking for what we call shovel-ready projects. Not, we could do this in 3 years. Who could actually start spending money right away and get us quick to construction? And because we've been waiting, and we have a concept plan, and we have a site, we own it, we could start with some of the reclamation, demolition work that needs to go right away, and we could actually be well on our way quickly.
What do we need here? What does the city need to help it through in terms of money? Do you have a number in mind?
Right now, the city of Stratford believes we're going to have a $3 million hole in our budget for this year. Now that's if we stay in a steady state.
Have we ever had a $3 million hole?
No, actually we just finished a year with a $1.2 million surplus. So we have a $3 million hole. That $3 million we made up with using last year's surplus and a combination of canceling certain projects where we had set money aside and using it to cover whatever we're short, as well as the layoff and the savings from those. And that should get us through. Now, if that changes, we will have to look at it again, and we're prepared to, but right now we're very confident we're at it.
Are we going to lose programs and well, I'm watching the number 4 head down to the bus terminal. What about public transit?
I would say this public transit is going to stay as it is today. We're not going to be looking to cut public transit.
Were you looking to build it, to build out public transit in this city?
We were, and that was part of the large announcement Minister McKenna made in February with regard to a new fleet of buses, on-demand service for Sundays, look at expanding into weekends and weeknights, new fleet opportunities. So we were expecting to do a lot of those things. We're still going to do them. The time frame will be a little bit more difficult.
How far out do you think?
I think what we, for example, by now in June, we're hoping to have on-demand service ready to go. We're probably looking at into September, October. But I think that then allows people to use transit on weekends, and as soon as we understand how the system works, then we'll take it to weeknights.
I know people who want inter-city, inter-community bus service. I mean, this has been talked about, hasn't it, for a while now. Is that going to happen to get me from here to London?
July 2nd. So we had received that funding previously from the provincial government. It was supposed to start on April 1st. We had picked Voyago out of London, who is doing a lot of the community intercity transportation across southwestern Ontario. We've delayed the opening to July 2nd, and they will have a bus that will go from London to St. Mary's, Stratford, and Kitchener. And then in partnership with the county, they'll have a bus that will go across Perth County, say from Listowel to Moncton to Mitchell to Stratford to Milverton, and they will feed into that system. So they're all supposed to start in July of this year.
And COVID could affect the opening of this intercommunity.
At some point, though, we have to go ahead for a number of reasons. One is it's a service that people were looking for 2 years ago, and they can't keep waiting. Two, the funding source we've had to already apply because it was a 5-year pilot project for the province, which they funded. We had to ask them to back up the termination date by 3 months. We'd have to ask them to back it up again. And I just think people need to understand what COVID life's going to be like and take into consideration on those buses, much like we had to in our public transit.
What about Via Rail?
Via Rail is the mysterious challenge that will never come forward. I don't care how many times I've been to Montreal, how many times I've spoke to the president and CEO of Via. They will not step up to the plate on the North Main Line. I think it's just pettiness on their part.
Well, what, is it not bums and seats as well? I take it all the time, and there aren't a lot of people using it.
Well, if you had terrible times, you're down to 2 trains, you leave here at 8:30, you can't take it for business because you're not downtown till 20 to 11. I don't know many people that start work at 11, and if you want to come back, what time are you getting out of Toronto to come back? I think it's pettiness on their part because of GO Transit's expansion across the North Main Line, where the province went and electrified the line to as far as Kitchener, and Via said, well, they've taken all the morning commute traffic and they're going to bring back the afternoon commute traffic, therefore we don't care, and we basically abandoned the line, and the only reason they're continuing to run it is because there's some obligation from the federal government to do so. Have had what I would call an outstanding response from them with regard to call off, sick time, vacation, a lot of those things. They have been very judiciously measuring that. I think as time goes on, though, we have to figure out how we go from a heightened state and we start bringing some of them some time so that they can get some time off.
And so the head of the police association, Rob McMillan, he laid out a case for what he saw were problems in terms of the budget for police getting squeezed, that he thought that the police were getting a bit of a rough ride on sick days, and that the true story wasn't being told. They were overworked, they were stretched to the limit, the money, the budget was shrinking, and crime was going up. So this was Rob McMillan, gosh, nearly 4 months ago, and here we are in a crisis, a state of emergency. What of what he said at the time rings true to you? How do you respond to his concerns 4 months ago?
So I would say Rob's concerns centered around 3 pieces. One is we have a large pool of vacation time available to officers. Some officers who were towards the end of their career had longer term injuries that needed to be addressed, whether it's a knee, it's a shoulder, or something happened along the way. And so they might have retired from an injury, but they still have vacation and sick time to pay out. So they were not available to us to do frontline patrol, but they were still on the payroll. So I think that's one of the challenges where the statistics don't necessarily tell the story. And for, I would say, the board and others looking at that, they would say sick time is up, what's going on? But there are underlying circumstances such as that led to that.
How has the chair of the Police Services Board and your colleagues, how have you responded? Do we have enough for our police officers?
We have enough frontline officers in the Stratford Police Service. We have the same ratio per resident as we had before. What we have done is we added a number of officers when we took on St. Mary's and Perth South. We had bought more equipment. The challenge becomes vacation schedules, sick time. They put challenges on the minimum staffing levels that go with it. I think, though, it is tough for a city, any city, Stratford being one, to look at increasing the level of spending on emergency management services, whether it's police, fire, paramedics, at a time like this, and overall.